Hey everyone, I'm Elfiles, and welcome to week 3 of the WCL. Last time I faced off against Hitmonjan and the Close Combat Club and took a nice 4-0 win using Farigiraf and Tinkaton to pivot into my offensive core, featuring Specs Greninja and Terra fighting Regieleki. It was a very fun match, go check it out if you haven't already. But now we're in week 3 and we're up against AJ and his Chicago Clods. AJ is a new coach to the league, and from his first 2 weeks, I do get the impression that he's a little less experienced with competitive Pokemon, bringing some sets that I would say are pretty suboptimal. We're looking at things like Poison Point, All-Out Offensive Clodsire, and Terra Psychic Opportunist Espathra as examples. And obviously no shame in that, but this has unfortunately led to them being 6-0'd in both of their matches so far. With that said, I can't just discount this match. If the right sets are brought, there is a lot of potential for me to get bodied by this interesting and potentially very dangerous team. So starting off, we have Chi-Yu, followed by Murkrow, Kingambit, Gyarados, Screamtail, Terra Espathra, Clodsire, Ogerpon Cornerstone, Terra Regice, Terra Dusknoir, and Bastiodon. And we do have to start by talking about that Chi-Yu. It is a ridiculous breaker, and my counterplay to it is fairly limited. I have the coveted resist to its dual stabs, but that resist is Greninja, not the bulkiest thing in the world. And I see a couple other things on that team that would love bulky walls and dark types getting worn down. Kingambit can go pretty crazy in the late game, and Terra Espathra is also a ridiculous late game sweeper enabled by the raw breaking power of Chi-Yu as well as Kingambit. Other than that, Clodsire and Screamtail are great bulky pieces, although the coach has been running them very offensive, and Ogerpon or Gyarados could round out the offense with some good power and bulk. I kind of see those as the top 7, with the bottom 4 being not quite as impactful here. So there are some pretty threatening mons on that side, but there are at least a few pretty big holes in the team that I can try to take advantage of. The first thing to note is that this is a very hazard weak team with no removers at all, and a bunch of Pokemon weak to rocks and spikes. The other main thing is a lack of resist to several types. The team has a huge ground weakness, not unlike mine actually, and there are a ton of neutral types that also look pretty spammable. So this looks like it's going to be a matchup that I need to build really offensively. So with that in mind, I am kicking the build off with Regieleki. We're going Terra Ground with Soft Sand to take advantage of that big ground weakness, and I'm also max attack to hit Clodsire as hard as possible. The ground resists are Gyarados and I suppose Murkrow, so electric moves take care of those two. A Volt Switch allows me to KO Gyarados while also pivoting out of that pesky Intimidate drop, and it also safely chips down things like Regice, Screamtail, and Ogerpon if they're not yet in range of my other moves. And while I'm going the physical Regieleki, I figured I'd try out Supercell Slam. It's my strongest option into any neutral targets, and that damage output could be important against Screamtail and Regice. I'm pretty apprehensive about using Supercell Slam. It seems like a move that can let you down in some pretty big ways, but I think I'll mostly be relying on Terra Blast and Volt Switch anyway in this match, so this should be fine. Then in the last slot, we're going with Thunder Wave. This is just meant to keep Espathra in check if it is in fact Speed Boost. We have enough speed to outrun +1 Screamtail, and that'll do it for the set. I expect this to be a great pivot and cleaner. Next up, we have Greninja, and we're running a sort of bulky Assault Vest set, purely so that we can check Chi-Yu to at least a decent degree. The set has enough investment to avoid the 2-hit KO from a modest specs Chi-Yu Flamethrower, while still outspeeding Screamtail and threatening a KO on Chi-Yu with Surf after Rocks. Surf and Dark Pulse make up the stab combination for solid coverage, U-Turn is of course there for pivoting, and Low Kick rounds out the set by hitting Kingambit hard. Even with a timid nature, it threatens a 2-hit KO on the max HP Kingambit. This sort of establishes Greninja as a solid blanket check to a few different things in the matchup. If I feel like Chi-Yu is handled, we have solid matchups into both Kingambit and Espathra, especially if the Espathra is Terra Fire, which I would kind of expect to deal with Tinkaton. Lastly, the ability on this is Battle Bond. That's not because I'm necessarily expecting a sweep out of this, it's more that I'm just motivated to keep my original typing, which I do need in order to keep a good matchup into the things I'm supposed to check. And if I do get the Battle Bond boost at any point, the stat boosts are a nice bonus to have. There's definitely some sweeping potential here, even if Clodsire is looming with access to both Unaware and Water Absorb. Next up, I'm going to have Dawnfan here, and this is mainly here as the Clodsire counter. I should be able to switch in on anything from it, and from there Earthquake is strong. I'm invested to always one-hit KO max HP Clodsire with it, with the rest of my EVs going into defensive bulk to take hits. The Rindo Berry allows me to stay in on an Ogerpon and take a grass move so I can respond with a big Earthquake, and Ice Shard helps to potentially finish it off from there. Stealth Rock is probably the move I'm clicking as soon as Donphan is into the battle to take advantage of that lack of hazard removal on the other side, and Rapid Spin is my move to clear any hazards set by that Clodsire. This should be a really good bulky attacker in the matchup on account of that big ground weakness on my opponent's side. Next up, I do need a more dedicated Espathra counter and a check to that Screamtail, so I'm going with fully specially defensive Tinkaton. Unless Espathra is carrying a Terra type that's super effective in the Tinkaton, this should eat any hit from it pretty easily, and we can retaliate with a big Gigaton Hammer or an Encore to lock it into either setup or an attack that I can respond to. Knockoff is another great spammable move, and Thunderwave is another way to cripple both Espathra and Screamtail. That is kind of all I have to say about the set. It's a pretty basic one this time. Moving on, told you I'd be taking advantage of that lack of hazard clearing from my opponent, so we're going with Spike's Quillfish. The goal here is simple: get Quillfish in early and lay down as many layers of spikes as possible. A couple layers plus rocks from Donphan will mean that every switch made on their side is a ton of progress for me, pushing everything into range of my fast cleaners. Quillfish's secondary purpose in the matchup is to be a physically defensive check to multiple mons, using that Intimidate. We can switch into Ogerpon as well as Supreme Overlord Kingambit decently well. Toxic wraps up chick damage on the threats. This is supposed to check. Haze stops Kingambit from getting out of control, especially if we happen to switch in on it and it's Defiant. And Pain Split should be able to keep me healthy against the generally large HP pools on my opponent's side. We're lacking any offensive moves on this set, but I think that's okay. I'm not really expecting Taunt on any of my opponent's sets. And then lastly, we have Furret. I'm running this as a Choice Scarfer this week, so with our investment, Furret can outrun my opponent's entire unboosted team. From there, we're max attack Adamant for the damage output, and the remaining EVs are optimized in bulk to take a jolly Ogerpon Power Whip from full. Body Slam hits for passable neutral damage, Brick Break hits Ogerpon and Kingambit, Thunder Punch for that Gyarados, and U-Turn for some fast pivoting. Now, would Ogerpon or Salamence have been stronger attackers in this slot, especially with a Scarf maybe? Generally, yeah, they probably would have been better, but Furret does actually provide a couple of things in a fast attacker that those two can't. The first is a neutrality to all of Gyarados' moves. Last week, AJ brought a special set with Ice Beam and Hurricane, and that would actually mess with a lot of my offense, so Furret actually provides the unique ability to switch into it relatively safely and then outspeed and one-hit KO it in return. The other thing Furret's got going for it is Frisk. Like I said before, my opponent has been running some unconventional sets this season, so scouting items can provide some defense against a wacky set catching me off guard. If there's any matchup where I can show off the offensive utility of this Pokemon, it's probably this one. Here's hoping to fill a niche this week. So that's going to be the team for week 3. We have a few low tiers coming off the bench this week, and a couple of pretty passive sets, honestly, so I think I'll be relying on Regieleki and Greninja to do a lot of the heavy lifting this time. That's fine, I'll put my trust in the top tiers to lead the way. Alright, here's the battle, and looking at team preview, I'm not too surprised by anything. Of that quote-unquote top 7, the one that's messing here is Ogerpon, which is fair enough, although that Rindoberry on Donphan is now pretty much useless. Oh well, the Terra type on Espathra is Psychic, so yeah, I'm assuming that's a copy-paste of the not very threatening Terra Blast Opportunist set from the previous weeks. I'll certainly take it. So now, for the lead, I had Quillfish in my head for a while going into this to get a couple of spikes up as soon as possible, but now that I'm here in the battle, I'm kind of hesitating on that. Actually, without Ogerpon or Dusknoir here, Quillfish looks pretty bad in general. 2 Psychic types, a Chi-Yu, potentially Special Gyarados, and Clodsire. Yeah, maybe Quillfish wasn't the best bring. So instead of leading with that, I'm just going to try Regieleki. I outspeed everything, and worst case, I can Volt Switch out of something to gauge damage. Let's lock that in. Good luck, have fun to AJ. We will see the Kingambit lead. Definitely a little unconventional. Glad I didn't lead Quillfish because lead Kingambit does imply Defiant. So I could rip a Terra Blast here, but that actually doesn't do all that much, and Kingambit could hit me pretty hard in return. I do feel okay Volt Switching though. Worst case, I get hit by a Sucker, and it would have to be Banded to have a chance at KOing me. So I'm just going to hit this Volt Switch, and I go in for 19%. And looking at that calc, that to me implies a Spadef set. So I felt safe enough going Donphan here, but Kato Cleave comes out and does a big chunk to me actually, way more than I was expecting, and it immediately clicks, this is not specially defensive, it is a max attack Adamant Assault Vest set. It really sucks to take that damage on Donphan, and if it has any speed creep or if it's Sucker, I have to tank even more damage in state if I want to stay in an Earthquake. I don't think I can afford to do that. This is my main and probably only Clodsire response, so afraid of the damage I could take, I will just double out here. I'm going to go to Tinkaton, which turns out to be a decent play because AJ swaps to Gyarados, probably anticipating that Earthquake. We do even get that Intimidate block with the own tempo, which is nice. This isn't an amazing Tinkaton matchup, but it's not bad either. I would actually really appreciate getting a Thunder Wave off on this, just in case it's Dragon Dance. But like I assumed, it's Special Gyarados. We just take an Ice Beam. Not even sure what that was covering, but it's fun. But now that it's going for Ice Beam and slower than me, because the Thunder Wave did go off, I suppose I can Encore and protect myself from the potential Earthquake it could go for next. And then I could maybe use that as a free pivot to either Qwilfish or Greninja. Or switch out to Clodsire, Encore whiffs, and I'm actually not in a great spot. That was a good switch on their part. That was a fairly obvious, I'm going to be honest, as the right play for them, so maybe I should have tried to be on top of that. Regardless though, Donphan is still the check. I can come in and take this Poison Jab, which actually does significant chip and poisons. Yeah, I'm actually really regretting the lack of leftovers here, because Donphan is starting to fade fast with this poison damage racking up. That is max attack Clodsire, which unironically gives me a pretty tough time right now. It's very tempting to try and take it out with an Earthquake, which will KO, but my opponent has been making sensible switches into the obvious moves, so I think a swap out of Clodsire is happening. Might as well get my rocks up, this will help against the whole team. They look pretty strong here. Gyarados does come in, and rocks are going to be able to go up, and Donphan is super low from that poison. What a Clodsire check this was, right? Well, I think either an Ice Beam or a Water move is coming to finish me off here. I suppose Donphan can't even really do anything back to the Gyarados. The only thing I can hit it with is Ice Shard. So I guess Qwilfish is going to be safe enough. I do come in with that, and we actually do get the Intimidate and that nice full para. Now I could start setting up spikes, but if this Gyarados is the full set that I'm expecting, it probably has Thunderbolt, which, crazy enough, that 2 KOs me no problem. So gonna want to switch out. I do have a couple of Thunderbolt switch-ins that can threaten me, that can threaten the 1-hit KO in return to the Gyarados. Regieleki is quite tempting, but I'm still wary of Earthquake being a possibility in this situation. So I actually do have another option that can tank both a Thunderbolt and an Earthquake and then go for the KO. That's right, we're doubling out here to Furret, and we tank, after reversing the Assault Vest, tank that Thunderbolt, and never saw it coming, Thunder Punch for the 1-hit KO. We got Furret on the board, love to see it. That does bring in the Clodsire, and whether my opponent knows it or not, I'm locked into Thunder Punch here. And looking at my team at this point, what's the Clodsire answer? Never thought I'd have to say this, but yeah, offensive Clodsire is putting on the pressure. Donphan has to switch in here, you know, as my check, but it's no match for this beast. Clodsire claims one with Earthquake. My options here to revenge are actually kind of limited. It's down to Greninja and Regieleki, and Regieleki has way more damage output into this, so that's what we're going to have to go with. I'll admit, this is definitely showing my hand a little bit. He should know I'm going for Terra Blast, but what he doesn't know is that I'm physical, and I could just get the 1-hit KO from here. It's not guaranteed. It looks like I need a relatively high roll, but Clodsire also can't 1-hit KO back, so I feel safe enough. So we're going to go with that Terra Ground. Terra Blast does crit for good measure, I guess that works too, and Clodsire does go down. That's actually a big threat out of the way, I hate to say it. But here we have King Gambit as the revenge, which sounds wrong, but with how bulky it is, I don't even come close to KOing with a Terra Blast from this range, so I do kind of need to Volt Switch out. This is going to be on the double out to Screamtail, probably covering the hard swap to Greninja, which is fair enough, so I'm just going to go Tinkaton. From that Volt Switch damage, that definitely looks like a no-bulk Screamtail, so I'm betting this is that offensive Life Orb set that's been brought for the first 2 weeks. No problem, we can just take this Flamethrower, actually crits, but doesn't even do half, and I can just go for a Gigaton for that easy KO. The game's kind of winding down at this point, because his Pathra is coming in, and Tinkaton is already my counter to this, so I'm just going to click Encore on this turn. Should be able to stop in his tracks if it turns out to be that Speed Boost Calm Mind, but no, it is just Terra Psychic Terra Blast, and it's locked in now with that Encore. And yeah, hopefully this coach figures out how to optimize this mon a little more moving forward. As for me, well, it's locked into a Psychic type move, so I might as well bring in my Dark type. Greninja is in a pretty easy position here. I'll just go for a Surf to call the switch to King Gambit. I could have and probably should have gone for Low Kick, but there's honestly no need. I can just do that on this turn now, and King Gambit goes down. There is our Battle Bond boost. That was another roll actually on that Low Kick, but just like last time, I wasn't really in much danger of getting KO'd there. This is a pretty bulky Greninja, so even if it was like an X-Scissor or something, I was fine. But yeah, there's 2 Pokemon left, and neither of them have any counterplay to this. Dark Pulse for Espathra easily KOs, and then of course, for the Chi-Yu, we have Surf. That's going to be an easy KO from +1. And that's the game, pretty quick at a 5-0. Despite the victory, the game was a little messier than I would have liked it to be, and that mostly comes down to the builder. I just got really excited about using some of my low tiers, Quillfish especially. I really wanted to lay down all those spikes, but its matchup really was pretty bad. If I was building optimally, I probably would have fit Salamence in over Quillfish at the very least, and then maybe Farigiraf over Furret. Those decisions probably would have helped out a lot against Clodsire and Gyarados, which ended up being tough for me to switch into with the team I brought. But once those 2 were down, I had prep upon prep for everything else, resulting in a 5-0 win off the back of a Greninja sweep, as well as a great little moment for it, so honestly, I regret nothing. GG to AJ. I can tell he's improving as the season goes on, and honestly, I like the plays being made in his battles. It's just the team builder that needs the most work, but once that's in place, I think we have another strong competitor in the WCL. As for me, I'm up to 3-0 for the season, so off to a pretty strong start here. That'll do it for week 3. Next time I'm up against Chad and the Seattle Steamrollers. They're always a good challenge to face, so I'm looking forward to that one. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.